Episode 6, Whistle in the Woods. Good evening, my name is Jason and I'm a retail worker living in Nebraska. My strange story happened just a couple of years ago, shortly after I finished university. I don't know if you'd call my experience paranormal or just straight up weird. Either way, it's a story that still gives me chills. So I'd wrapped up university and decided to go on a camping and fishing trip with my friends. Some of us lived in different states, so we really wanted to have one last adventure together. There was myself, Harry, Dawn and Gemma. We had all settled on Colorado for the trip. I'd rented an RV for the week and we headed out into a remote part of the forest. It was off-grid, with a nearby creek and a lake, ideal for fishing. Once off the interstate, we passed through a number of small settlements for gas and supplies, each settlement getting smaller and smaller as the more remote we got. I remember by one of the last stops that I didn't even recognise some of the brands of candy bar or drink anymore. At one particular old gas stop, the clerk was really friendly and happy to make conversation with us. We told her that we were going up into the woods. Now, she didn't say anything too specific, but I remember the gist of what she said. Basically, she was just telling us to be careful of the wildlife. The area where we were going wasn't exactly a destination point for many. She commented on how isolated it was up there where we were going, and we were unlikely to see anyone for days. There wasn't even a well-known walking trail in the area where we were headed. She alluded that the locals tell strange tales of the whistling woods. Of course, I didn't think too much of it at the time. We said good day and headed out with numerous bags of chips, sodas and canned food. We arrived at our destination later than planned. Since there were no settlements nearby, I simply had to put a random pin in the GPS to get us close, to get us somewhere that looked interesting on the satellite view. It was a really cool location though. We were under a canopy of thick pine trees. We could see the night sky. We could see thousands of stars. The only sound we could hear was that of the creek somewhere not too far off in the distance. That night we all slept in the rather cramped RV. The plan had been to set out the tents, but it was too late by the time we'd got there. Come the morning, we could see where we were much better. The location was stunning. This was the real outdoors. I was also amazed that we'd got the van this far into the woods. All around us was thick vegetation and dense woodland. That day we set up the tents at the side of the van, one for myself and Harry and one for the girls. I'd also set up the solar panels on the roof of the van to help us charge our phones. I was worried at the time though, as there was little in the way of direct sunlight due to the tree cover. We swam in the river by day and made a campfire by evening. Dawn had shared an experience from earlier in the day. As she was out swimming, she swore that she had seen a glint of something metallic in the woods on the far side of the shore. She said how it was accompanied by a distant whistling sound and had moved after she began to stare at it. We assured her that it was very unlikely that anyone was out this far, and even if they were most likely just hikers like ourselves. She was clearly uneasy about the situation though. Anyway, we settled into our respective tents and bedded down for the night. I was awoken by noises of someone whispering. It was the girls in the tent next to us. All of a sudden, the pair came hurtling into our tent. Harry jumped for dear life as they woke him. Of course, I asked what the matter was. It was then that Dawn said that she could hear the whistling again. We all sat there and listened. The most we could hear was some noises from the canopy, and perhaps some sort of owl. Instantly, myself and Harry shrugged it off. Honestly, there was absolutely nothing out of the ordinary for being this deep into the woods. The girls, though, wouldn't have any of it and spent the rest of the night in the RV. By morning, we joked with them, you know, typical town girls being scared of the woods, etc. That day, we hiked to the top of a ridge to get some photos. The place was amazing. Dawn needed to use the ladies' room, so Gemma went with her a little way into the woods. All of a sudden, we heard a screaming from the girls. Of course, myself and Harry ran right into them. They really hadn't gone too far. "What's wrong?" we asked. We'd assumed that one of them had hurt themselves due to the urgency of the screams. They told us that they had seen something moving in the woods. Instantly, we thought either bear, deer, or any other number of creatures. Either way, It seemed to have been scared off, at least for now. Here's what Dawn said though. She insisted that we were wrong. She admitted that the full view was obscured by the trees, but she knew what she had seen. I'll try to describe it as she told it as best I can. She said that it looked like some sort of man covered completely in black. He wasn't walking upright though. He was on all fours and was creeping along the floor, very much as a spider walks. He had been approaching slowly and stuck his head around a tree to observe the girls. As he did so, he made a whistling noise from his mouth area. Once spotted, he scuttled at high speed back into the cover of the woods. Myself and Harry really didn't know what to make of this, but it was clear, regardless of what Dawn had seen, that she very much saw something. We walked back to the campsite over the next couple of hours. It was dark by the time we got there, and we lit a campfire. Under the cover of darkness, I think we all felt a little apprehension. Regardless, myself and Harry slept in the tent whilst the girls slept in the van again, or at least tried to. The next day we headed out to a nearby cave mouth. For obvious reasons we didn't go in far, but it was cool to see. I don't think that the girls were enjoying themselves much though. Upon making it back to the campsite that evening, we all had a shock. Both tents had been taken down. They looked like they'd been trampled by something. It was clear to me that a bear must have been looking for food. That was my conclusion until I went to unlock the van. Someone had clearly been trying to get in. The door handle was smeared in mud, as if a dirty hand had been trying to force it open. There were several handprints on the van itself, and the solar panel had also been torn down off of the roof. From somewhere not too far away in the darkness, we all heard a loud two-tone whistle. I quickly got everybody inside and drove off in the dark. I didn't care where, we just needed to be gone. The problem was that we were essentially lost. There were no clear roads and the GPS was essentially useless, as there were no official paths or roadways. I simply tried to back up and keep the creek on my left. We perhaps drove for an hour in the darkness of the woods, getting more and more lost into the thicker woodland. This was to the point we were practically stuck. We agreed to turn off the engine, all the lights, and hunker down for the night. None of us would sleep though. Our only hope was that we had lost the thing in the darkness. When we woke, it was clear that we were indeed very lost. We were well off the known tracks and there was no sign of the creek. What really shook me though was what we found outside the door of the RV. There was a pile of branches with sort of a moss nest placed upon it. Inside the nest was what appeared to be a collection of teeth, human teeth, still with fresh blood attached. I remember looking at Harry, both of us freaking out inside. We nodded at each other and quickly moved it so that the girls wouldn't see. That would have sent Dawn over the edge. At least this way we could pretend that we had lost the thing in the woods. The van was well and truly jammed in the wood. Even if we could get it out, there was no way of reliably driving it back to town. The only option was for someone to get help on foot. By my reckoning, we would only be about 10 miles into the mountains at this point. We would have enough juice in our phones if we only used them one at a time. We also had a pin of the last gas station that we went to. I think everyone was up for the hike. Again, there was no advised route. We simply had to do this one the old-fashioned way, take a bearing and head as the crow flies through the forest. It was a long day, even though we had only taken the essentials. We were all terrified as we knew that we weren't alone. Every now and again, we heard the terrifying two-tone whistle from somewhere behind us. We each moved as fast as we could. The thing was though that we wouldn't be able to get to the gas station in the daylight. The creek and ridges were in the way, meaning that there was no direct route. 10 miles turns out to be at least twice that in reality when you don't have a direct route to go. By the time that the sun set, we knew that we would only make inches of progress and the likelihood of injuring ourselves in the dark too risky. We were consigned to the fact that we would have to spend the night sleeping under the stars in the forest. Despite being exhausted, I don't think any of us slept again that night. It was dark. We heard a scuttling that seemed to come from all around us. I held up my phone light to observe the darkness of the woods. Then, right in our ears, a loud two-tone whistle. It was clear that the thing in the woods was upon us. We each ran into the darkness of the woods, terrified for our lives. By morning, I had made it to the gas station to find Harry, exhausted and dishevelled, waiting for me. A local officer had wrapped a blanket over him and given him coffee. There was no sign of the girls, though. They must have spent the night in the forest. I felt sick with worry. A rescue party had been raised to find Dawn and Gemma. I thank our lucky stars that they were found together later that afternoon. Police dogs had tracked their scent and found them on the hillside. They had a truly horrific story to tell, as they told of how the creature had slowly tracked them to the point of exhaustion. As they lay in fear, they described the being more like a skeletal man in a black material. He crept on his hands and legs in the darkness. He got up close to them. He made a disturbing whimpering moan as he did so. He placed his pale, malformed head against Dawn as he sniffed her face. As he exhaled through his mouth, the disturbing whistle was made through the pattern of his missing teeth. He took nothing and said nothing, simply scuttling back into the undergrowth after watching them for several hours of leaving and returning. That was when the search party had found them. To this day, we have no idea what the thing in the woods was. Whatever it was, human or animal, we all agree though that we would never go camping again. If you enjoyed this week's paranormal story, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel for more tales of the supernatural and the unexplained. Until next time, my friends, happy hauntings.